All right, welcome back. So in the last lecture, we went over kind of the basics of less. Today, we're going to go over some more advanced topics in less and some ways to extend our less code to be more dynamic and more reusable for everything. So the first thing I want to talk about is our parametric mixins. So in the last lecture, we learned about mixins, right? Delete that for a second. We learned about mixins. So we can write these blocks of CSS, and then we can insert them anywhere we want inside of our text, right? So we see in our CSS. So we can see purple text, right? What we're doing is we're inserting this block of CSS in there. So we don't have to, if we have some CSS that we are reusing quite a bit, we don't have to write it over and over and over and over again. We write it once and we bring this one line in. So we write it as, it looks like a class. All right, so we should probably, and we'll see in the next video, how to separate these so that we know these are mixins. We should probably define this as a mixin somehow. Purple text is something, it could be a class, we don't know that, right? But this is a mixin. And so you are probably like, yeah, that's fantastic. We can write the CSS once, we put it in wherever we want, it's great. But what if we wanted to put that CSS in and then change a little something about it? And one thing we can do, we absolutely can do this, we can say color blue if we wanted to, right? And that's going to override just due to the cascading effect. But that's kind of like defeats the purpose, right? We have the color up here already. We've already defined the color. We don't want to have two colors in here where we wrote it again. So that way we're not even saving that much typing, that much space. And it kind of seems like we don't have a color in here. So what we can do is use something called a parametric mixin. And we're going to do this for something we use a lot, but that we want to change little tiny details about it. So let's think of something we use all over the place. First thing that comes to my mind is the display flex and our flexbox properties. We write display flex, justify content, align items everywhere, right? What if we could write all of this into one mixin and then just change it based on what justify and what align we wanted? And it would just instantly pop that in for us. So let's write a parametric mixin. I'm going to call this display flex. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write an open and close parentheses. I'm going to use this in a moment. But for right now, let's just create a regular old mixin. Let's go display flex. Let's say justify content space between. Let's say align items center. All right, so we can take this display flex. We know this is a mixin because we just wrote it as such. And we can come in here and let's just get rid of these lines now. And we can say display flex, call it with our open and close parameters. And look, there we go. We've got it, okay? So now we can use this anywhere we want. Let's go into our section. Let's go display flex. And look at that. It has given us those same properties. So let's come back up here. And let's say that we wanted all of our items in this to align to the beginning and not align to the center. Well, we could come in here and say align items flex start. And that would work, but that's also defeating the purpose. What we could do is to make this ultra reusable is introduce what's known as a parameter. And a parameter allows us to create variables inside of our mixins only for use in our mixins, and we can set those variables whenever we call that mixin, whenever we include it. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an open and close parentheses, And then inside of it, we're just going to write the name of some variables. So let's just say at justify, and then we can write multiple. We can write as many as we want. We have to separate it with a column, or a comma, excuse me. And then we'll say at align. All right, so we have at justify and at align. So what this is saying is this is telling us that when we use display flex, we want to, we are going to give it values for these, okay? And then what we want to do is we want to use these variables. So let's use it right here, at justify, and let's use it at align as well, at align. All right, so you can see nothing's happened because actually our code broke. Because when we call display flex, we haven't given it any properties. So it doesn't even know what we're talking about, right? And I'm gonna just comment that out for a moment so we can focus on that first one. So in here, let's say we wanted to do this justify space between align center. So we see that our first item is justify. So let's do space between. Okay, so we have space between, and we do the same for the parameters. We do them for the values right here. We comma separate them. And let's say our align, we want it to be center. And there we should see it. Well, now let's just play around with it. Now we can use this anywhere we want to add display. So let's go center. There's our center. Let's go space evenly. Spaced evenly. Oh, that looks great. All right. So now we can add this display flex wherever we want. We can give it the justify and we can give it the align. And it's going to plug those in and it's going to give us back our that CSS. Right. So if we want to justify an align here, let's go justify space between and let's go align flex. Start. And there we go. And now we can include this wherever we want. Obviously, this doesn't look great, but just to show you that we can change those around. And we can look at our compiled CSS and see that, there we go. Our section is flex, space between, flex start, justify align items. Our header nav is flex, space evenly, and center. All right, now we can use this wherever we want. This is known as a parametric mixin, and these come in great handy. One thing I want to show you too is that we can, so that's our parametric mixins for us. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about are functions. Functions are a big thing in Less. There is a function for everything. Let's go take a look at the functions in Less. Let's see, we have, these are all functions. There are a lot of them, all right? So there's a function for everything you want. Remember in the last video I said that math, the operators are great, but we have all kinds of math functions. So you want a square root, you can get a square root. You want a percentage, a rounded function, a sine, a cosine, you can get all kinds of stuff. And this works well for like very advanced CSS. But most of us aren't going to use a cosine function in our everyday CSS. Some things that we will use are, if I can find it in here, color hue, light, let's go, lighten. There we go. We'll use like the lighten and the darken. So say we have a color and we want to just tone it down a little bit. We want to say that like maybe on hover, we're going to make it so that that color is 10% of what it normally should be. So let's come in here and look, and I'm going to show you little pseudo selectors as well. So in here we can pseudo select the anchor tags, and we use the and symbol for a pseudo selector, and we just write the pseudo selector we want, and hover. Okay. So let's go, color is going to be, and to include a function, we can see the function signature in here is going to be, we say the name of it, and then we give it some values. First is the color, and then how much we want to lighten it by. All right, let's just say we're going to go lighten, and let's go our background purple, and let's say 30%. All right, let's see if it works. There we go. Now on our hover, we can see that our color has been lightened by 30%, and we can adjust that. Let's go 90% if we want. Like, oh, it almost disappears. It might actually disappear. Maybe show 70. There we go. All right, so we can do whatever we want. This is going to take that color and decrease the color by 70%, which is really cool because you would have to get a hex calculator out. You would have to do all those calculations to find out what it is. And then what happens is your colors change, right? So instead of purple, we're going to go with green or something. And then you got to do it all over again, right? But instead, this does it automatically for us. Okay, and so let's, instead of saying lighten, let's darken this. And 70% is going to be a lot, so I'm gonna almost make it black. So let's just go 20%. We're going to darken it by 20%. It's still dark. Let's go 10%. Oh, not 120%. There we go. Okay, so you can use these functions. Go ahead and look through them. Darken, fade in, fade out, fade, spin. You can spin, saturation. There's all kinds of crazy color. All of this stuff you can do in here, these functions. So know these functions, and then we can just write the name of it, give it the parameters we want. I don't even know what tint is. Let's find out what tint does. It's a very, very light. But there might be a case when you won't need to use something like this, like, right? So we have this great UX now that we know what we're logged over, or that we're hovering over when we have this in here. So you can start to use this to create really cool little effects like that. So those are functions. The final thing we're going to talk about right now is escaping. So say that we have a media query here, and we have our max width of 800 pixels, 800 pixels. The max width is 800 pixels. We want to make this a variable so that, you know, when you're using media queries, you're going to be, you know, a developer, and your design team comes up and they say, hey, we are setting our media query at 800 pixels. All of our stuff is 800 pixels. So you and your team develop an entire application, entire website with this 800 pixel thing, and you've got hundreds of media queries in there. And then the team comes back and like, actually, we're going to change it to 760. And you're like, oh, okay, now I've got to go in and change every single media query to 760. What we can do is set a variable on this entire thing here. So what we're going to do is come up to the top, and we're going to say at desktop. We'll say tablet on this one, since it's max width. So we're going to create a variable like we normally would, right? Like just like background purple. And we can't do that, okay? Less doesn't allow us to do this. You need to wrap this. You're like, oh, can I just wrap it in a string? And in current version, the most latest version of Less, you can wrap it in a string. But we want to teach you something called escaping, which is going to is a requirement in all but the most current version of Less. And what you do is you just put a tilde in front of it, a little squiggly in front of it. And what that tells Less is it tells the Less, the compiler, that what you've given it here, you want to unwrap the entire thing, okay? And so we can come down in here and say, instead of saying media at 800, we're going to say at tablet. And then we have another media query right here. Instead of at 800, we're going to say at tablet. So now, we can see, and we can change it. That's very, very, very small. I'm sorry. That we can change our tablet instead of 800, we'll change that to 1,000. Like instantly, we now get all of that up to 1,000. Okay. Make sure you include your semicolons. So now at 1,000, we should get that breakpoint. There we go. All right. So that covers it. That is functions, parametric mixins, and escaping. I'll see you in the next video.